for us to think on these things, right? When Jesus and other prophets throughout time, from all different walks of life, because as much as we may want to keep the prophetic gift isolated to a certain group of people, that's just not the reality. Because God is all things at all times at the same time. God uses whom He will, and that's been, it's just something that's a reality and a fact. And the heart is where God looks. So God is not biased, right? He's no respecter of persons. So every gift, everything that's ever been created in us, we know is God expressing the fullness of Himself in the earth. And that's if you believe on the lines of God being omnipresent, right? And omniscient, knowing all things, being everywhere at one time. Then that means that nothing in this life exists outside of God. Even the different mindsets and perspectives and personalities and ideas and all these different things that we have, all of these things come or are in existence as the great I am, expressing these things for the greater purpose that most of us don't really fully understand. So because I gotta say that there are some things that I'm still grappling with, like, okay, God, if love is law and if this is the thing, then where did all this other stuff come from? Where did the chaos and confusion come from? The end times that have been prophesied, like I said, by many, Christ Yeshua being one that spoke about the things to come. And I was sitting in meditation and prayer this morning. As a matter of fact, my brother sent us a group text last night, and I put it in my mind and my intention that I would pray and ask for insight on how to respond, because I want to be as careful about my responses as possible, being that I am a spiritual leader and teacher, right? I don't just want to talk out of my head. I want, Holy Spirit to be able to speak, because you just never know how it may, impact. And it's not my intention to cause anybody to stumble, just to live by faith. And living by faith means literally being convinced within yourself of what that truth is, what the truth is. And so we all have to come to that conclusion on our own. It's not something that is cookie cutter. We can't make it fit everybody. And again, we see that often when it comes to life in general, because you can have one message that starts, which of course we do, because God is one, right? Started there. And then intentionally God created differences and all of those things. So we have different faiths and religions, but underneath every religion and faith, there's, separations and divisions and things like that. But the problem is that we have not gotten to the point where we can accept the fact that it's okay for people to think differently than we do. And when we get to that place, then we'll understand that because God is all of us, God is all things, that everything has its place. But when we think about the end times, and he sent this message, and I was like, oh, this is really, interesting. I think I even went in, sowed a seed to order the book by the particular pastor who wrote the book and is giving the message about are we in the end times. And so I was in prayer about it, and I was like, God, how do I respond to this? Because God's spoken to me about end time things plenty of times over the years, right? Since I was young up until this point, because it wasn't that, and that I don't want to believe in those things. It's just that there's always been more, and God has been, dealing with me about those things. So there's been many of times, even before Yeshua was, arrived in the flesh, because the world has existed for so long. that there's been many of times where the generations before us have believed we were in end times, because what they see from their perspective as normal and, everyday life and consistent and constant, and, this is what's acceptable, this is what's not acceptable, what they were comfortable with in their time. Anytime those things are shifted or changed or altered, or anytime that there's an uprising and people rebel against the status quo of rules, laws, regulations, and things like that, or concepts and principles, there's always going to be the thought of the generation that this is too much, right? This is chaos. This is way too much. Back in biblical days, we read about so many wars and, going in, killing men, women, and children. And we read about people being beheaded and just all type of different things that happened back in their time. And to some of them, when their children or people that they were in connection with, would rise up and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to live the life I want to live, or I'm going to step out. There's something more. People were getting revelations, and then they were going in different directions. To a person who has a consistent thought of how things should be, then that's chaos, right? So it is in every generation, the end times will look a certain type of way, right, to people. And we do see the things that were spoken by the prophets and by Jesus. We see a lot of those things happening, but so did the generations before us. Because again, if it goes against their norm and their status quo, then it's going to look like total rebellion. It's going to look like, chaos and confusion. It's going to look like people are betraying God and what God stands for. If you're spiritual, if you're religious, it's going to look like, mothers against daughters, sons against fathers, race against race, culture against culture, faith against faith. Everybody who has eaten from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. We see good and evil through our eyes, and we judge based on that. And that has caused much division and much chaos and much confusion. And thus, we have all of the different things that are happening. People are inquisitive, and they're exploring, and they're trying out things, and all the things that the scriptures tell us that we should do. Ask, seek, and knock. You search for me and you'll find me. And people throughout history have been searching for God in so many different ways. This makes sense to me, and this makes sense to me. Well, this makes sense to me. And so you have all of these different viewpoints of how things are going, and no wonder the end times continue to threaten to come upon us. Now, here's the reality. The more and more divided we get, the closer we get to the results of the end times that we have read about and heard about in prophecies. And I want you to think on these things, right? Has anybody considered, right? And I'll go ahead and quote in my own words, really, the 2 Chronicles 7:14. And even before that, right? Because there's so much to God that, even in the scriptures that we keep skipping over because, we dismiss the fact that God is the God of all things, all ideas, all concepts. But basically God was saying, if I cause, famines and earthquakes and issues and chaos and circumstances, right? Because all things come from my hands. All things come from me. I created them. I have purpose for everything, right? But if I cause all these things to happen, if my people, right, who are called by my name would humble themselves, pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and heal the land. Now that's something that is spoken as, if this happens, this can happen, right? And this also makes me think about when Jonah ran away because he didn't want to give this prophetic message to Nineveh, because, and later on he says, I knew you were, this fair God. I knew you were this loving God, and that you were not going to, do these punishments unto these people. And so Jonah felt some type of way because he felt like, bruh, I look stupid. I look stupid to the people coming with this prophecy of destruction, and then because you're such a loving God, you're going to lift this consequence. And so this is almost a cause and effect of sort, where we get messages, we get prophecies, we get all these different things, and it is most of the time so that we can heed the warning and shift the behaviors. So prophetically, I'm about to declare something to you, but I want you to really think about what I'm saying. Because yes, everything that the prophets and that Christ Yeshua and, the messages that have been coming have been very real. Right? This is what we've been dreaming. We've been seeing these things. We can see the chaos ensuing. There are so many that have the visions of what's to come. But has anybody stopped to think that these are the warnings that we are supposed to take heed to, so that we can thus do what Christ Yeshua was teaching as the gospel, as the good news? Have we considered that the end times have threatened to come multiple times throughout our lifetimes? And because somebody understood the message, turn from their wicked ways, in other words, begin to heal their hearts, the things that are in your heart that will cause you to be the one that murders or kills or uses prejudice and bias, or thinks that your idea is the best idea and this is the only thing that makes sense. And anybody who doesn't do that, then they obviously are not in tune, right? And we get into these mindsets, and then we begin to cause oppression. We begin to control and rule other individuals in this greater whole, as if they are not also a part of this greater whole, an expression of God in the earth. And so we want to dictate what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and all these different things. And then we expect people not to uprise, and we expect people not to kick against the grain. I got the image in my mind of a lion putting pressure on another animal, and something distracts the lion, and the lion looks away, and that person or that animal that's being suppressed or being pressed down, oppressed, gets the advantage. What do you think they're going to do when they get up? Either they're going to run away immediately, or they are going to rise up and they're going to do what they have to do to kill the lion. So much of what we see happening, is because of these cycles that we continue to go through, right? The things that we continue to do. And here's the message of Christ Yeshua. Here's the message of so many different, great souls and spiritual liberators. If we apply the law of love, because again, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all of yourself and love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands hangs all the laws and the prophets. And throughout the scriptures, he talks about the things that are to come, but more than those things, he teaches those things even to paint a picture that this is what's going to happen if you do not go within yourself, turn from the wickedness that's in your hearts. If you don't care about justice, if you don't, begin to pay attention to how you're treating other people, if you don't bear the burdens of them, have compassion for them, accept them, love them as God has expressed them as. And when you begin to do that, things will begin to shift. But if you keep having this heart that you have, this hardened heart, if you don't want to heal from the broken places that you have been in, if you don't want to stop trying to have control over everything and everybody, stop trying to oppress every system that doesn't line up with what you think, if you don't change the behavior that you're doing out of the issues of your heart, then chaos is going to ensue, and there's going to be absolutely nothing you can do about it. Annihilation will come. Annihilation will come. The law of love is not hype. Here are a couple of scenarios. Think about this, right? Because again, these things start somewhere. These feelings and emotions with people, they start somewhere. The wickedness in our hearts, it started somewhere, right? And let me go back to biblical stories and just give you real life scenarios too. But can you imagine how Adam and Eve felt when Cain killed Abel? Right? Can you imagine that they were really hurt, really broken? And the other siblings too, because they had other siblings, they had other people around them, and his family, his immediate family, all this. Can you imagine the feeling that they got when Abel was killed? Can you imagine the venom that could have been in their hearts, right? To now, we have to protect ourselves against Cain. Now, he was, excommunicated, put out of the garden, or whatever the case might be, sent to the land of Nod. And, but even in that, him being sent away, God said, no one is to touch him, right? Yes, he has a shortcoming. Yes, he has caused an offense, but he is still redeemable. There's still a possibility that he could change his thoughts and his mind. And I give that grace to each and every individual. So don't touch him. Right? But can you imagine what that murder did to the family? Now the family is on guard. Everybody around them is trying to make sure that they are protecting themselves so that they don't get murdered, or their families are, not murdered, or whatever the case might be. Brokenheartedness sets in. Right? Sadness, depression. Okay. And I went way back there to show you that there's a start to everything. And so now we have emotions we have grief, we have depression, we have anger, to the point where you're like, listen, I'm not going to ever let this happen again. So I got to protect mine. And then now you have everybody putting their guards up, and then you have wickedness or evil setting into the hearts of people because they are broken. And then consider Cain. I wasn't there back then. You weren't there back then. But I want to think of why Cain would feel like this is not, I'm not good enough, right? We have a lot of that happening now. People who, they're jealous of the favor of another, or the fact that that person's heart is pure and they're a good person. And so when they offer something, they offer it and it is counted as pure. God honors it because it comes from a pure heart. And then you're looking at the individual that's saying, but I'm not them. Right? I'm not them. So obviously I must not be good enough. Now my thoughts go to whether or not the parents were paying attention to the feelings of inadequacy of the other son. Why am I bringing this up, and why am I shedding light on all these different perspectives? Because this is where we could heal the land if we really wanted to. This is where we could hear from heaven. We could, God could hear from heaven and heal the land. This is where, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways. And wickedness, literally, and evil is like the void of love or the light, right, in an individual's existence. They don't govern themselves from the place of love. They govern themselves from a place of hurt and brokenness and anger and rage. But it ensued, it started somewhere. Now, what would happen if we took Christ Joshua's messages and the messages of spiritual liberators over the centuries, their message of love walking into consideration? Somebody may say, well, that's impossible because the world is not going to ever be 100% loving. And, there's always going to be somebody. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But hear me. Does it have to be you? Does it have to be you? Do you have to be one of the ones that carries this evil or wickedness in your heart? And you may say, well, what you mean? I'm not being wicked. Oh, but let's do a search. Can somebody come to you and just simply be who they are without you judging them? Without you throwing accusations and berating them and talking down to them? Can they do that? Can they come to you and just be without the criticism? The criticism that leads to the feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem, which causes all type of things to set in: depression, mental health disorders, all type of things, and the mental health disorders that lead to outbursts and random acts of hate and all type of things. It is a cycle effect. So I am just presenting to you today for you to think, what would happen if we sit this thing back in reverse, if we individually begin to look at the things that the end times are described as? Because we're looking at the end times and we're saying, is this really happening in the earth? Is this happening? Is this happening? Is this happening? Is this happening? Yeah, you see a lot of it. We see many things happening. Now, of course, no man knows the day or the hour. We don't know when annihilation will come. We don't know when everything could end, right? We don't. Not even Christ knows. Christ Jesus knows. That's what the scriptures say. So we don't know. We're guesstimating. We're trying to figure it out, which again, we can watch and we can pay attention to the signs of the time. But while we're paying attention to the signs of the time, are we paying attention to what's causing these things to ensue? Are we paying attention to who we are on the inside and how we are contributing to the end of all things? Are we taking into consideration the fact that our love walk ain't on track, and because we have been so broken and everybody's walking around in their emotions and their feelings and woe is me and the victim mentality and they did this to me, and we are not, and listen, hear me, many of them don't have the space to come in and say, hey, this is what's broken me, this is how I'm feeling, because love is not there waiting for them to help them heal it all. Love is patient, is kind, right? Long suffering, holds no account of wrong. Love includes grace and forgiveness. How often should you forgive? Well, 70 times 7. And that's just a summation. What Jesus is saying is as many times as necessary. Because we all fall short. We have all caused an offense. But when we begin to go within ourselves, begin to go within our hearts, begin to examine, hey, are you allowing for this unique expression of God in the earth to express? Now, here is where I know many people may be like, but I mean, what you trying to say? There's no right and there's no wrong. I will say this. It's going to be according to the person who's listening and thinking and talking. Right? Because what may be wrong for you may not be wrong for another person, and what may be right for you may not be right to another person. Again, Romans 14 in the Holy Bible Scriptures, you should read it. There's a preference. People have preferences. And to their own master do they rise and they fall. So it's between them and God. Right? So the one thing that I would consider, if I was going to, from my own perspective, consider something that was either right or wrong, which, I have my idea of what's right and what's wrong in my own mind and my own preference, but that's for me to govern my life and my standard, right? And in my mind, what's wrong is for me to not show absolutely unconditional love or to grow into that space, because there are still things that irritate me, just like it's things that irritate others. I still have preferences and biases, and there's some things that I just prefer not to do. And people who do it, it's going to make me feel some type of way until I check myself. But the absence of love for me is an issue. But what I've learned is that I have to respect and I have to honor those who choose not to accept it. It won't change my message. It won't change the fact that I absolutely 100% believe that when we do what Christ Yeshua was trying to tell us to do, bearing the burdens of one another, that requires compassion. That requires love. That requires, literally embracing those or giving grace and mercy to people on a regular and consistent basis as they grow into love as well. Giving the good news, which is you free. You're free to think and live. You're free to have total communication with God. You're free to tap into the kingdom of God that's within you and live this life. You're free. You're free. But let me say, if love is governing your heart, then there's just certain things that you will not do to another because it's something you will not do to yourself. If we tap into this, will we see a change in the earth's atmosphere? We're leaning into what's to come, because when we look at prophecy, a lot of times we look at prophecy and we just say, we set it and forget it, right? It's just got to go down that way. But we know that's not true, even if we just think about the story of Jonah, like I just said. The message was given to the people, and then their behaviors changed. And then the punishment, or the thing that was spoken, was lifted. While we're leaning into and studying and looking at the times, have we considered what we're contributing to the onset of those times? Have we considered? What if God is all of us? That's my upcoming book. It'll be released on December 18th of this year. It's coming from a place of think on these things. Because if God is all things at all times at the same time, doesn't it matter whether I really look at that or not when it comes to how I treat other people? Isn't it really understandable that if a person has been beat down and oppressed their whole life, they're going to want to rise up and take a stance and never be treated that way again? But here's the thing. Every side has a point to make. We have Black Lives Matter in response to cop behaviors. You have some corrupt cops, and then you have some amazing cops, but the amazing cops get to suffer because of the corrupt cops. And then you have amazing black people, and then you have some who take on the anger that they have received from the oppression that has happened. And no matter how much they try to heal, there's more oppression and more issues. And then you have the Caucasians or other people who have started slavery movements and things like that, because in their mind, because they were taught that you got to be the one who takes control before you are controlled. It's ingrained in us. We're programmed to hate and to be prejudiced and to be biased and to take from other people what we want, instead of just walking a mile ahead and establishing yourself in a place that's not taken yet. We go in and take over what belongs to somebody else instead of just finding land or finding space. Now, if you really think on these things and you really put yourself in the position where you're saying, look, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think my little contribution is going to change anything. You're wrong. You're wrong. Everything started somewhere. Every big thing that's happening in the world right now started someplace, and it spread abroad little by little. When Jesus was in the flesh, on this earth, and he was walking among those that he was associated with because of the culture he was born into, he didn't hold back his message. And because he didn't hold back his message, he was counted as a blasphemous, a heretic. His way was different than them, and they didn't want to see it that way. And of course, I wasn't there back then, so I can't tell you all the details. There's many studies about things that have happened, and we can study things written from years ago. There's so many things that I've studied. There's so many things that I can tell you right now. But the truth be told is that anything that is written down can be changed and tainted. Any story that is passed down from generations to generation to generation can be changed and altered. Any person who speaks that this is what God has told me, somebody else is going to always question it. Right? Because we're not in anybody's head, and we don't know exactly what is being said. And even those of us who carry gifts that are spiritual, and you might be empathetic or telepathic or whatever the case might be, even you don't know everything about everybody. So there's going to always be questions. There's going to always be a difference of opinion and a difference of thought. Here's the problem. When we don't just simply accept the fact that God is all things at all times at the same time, we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to break other people down and take what doesn't belong to us and mistreat other people, not consider the hurt and the pain that somebody else is going through because of what they've dealt with over their lifetime. That child who grew up in the religious family and every time they did something, it was, you got to honor your mother and father so your days will be long on the earth. And because you didn't, here's your punishment. Because we taught fear and punishment as a way of getting people to do what we want. If that's not manipulation and what we may call witchcraft, I don't know what is. And then they get locked away in the closet, or they get food rationed out to them every once in a while. Or, how do you think they're going to grow up? You think they're going to be healthy and sane? Or the person who's been abused all their life because the brokenness of their parents wasn't repaired. Their hearts weren't repaired. Hear me. And so they did the same thing to their children that were done to them. And what do you expect the kids to do? At some point, an uprising is going to happen. People are going to say, I will not take the injustice anymore. And here is where Jesus' message comes in. The injustice was the problem with him. He talked about it often with those, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And we're duplicating it still over and over and over again. And so if you are wondering whether we're looking at end times, we're looking at end time actions often. But have we considered our contribution to its coming? Have we considered our actions that lead to annihilation in the end? I want you to think on these things. It may not be what you want to think about today. It may not be, but I want you to consider it, because when you walk out that door, when you go to that workplace, when you do the things that you have to do today, and what you have in your heart is festering, and you're broken, and you're angry, and you're mad, and your mama didn't give you enough attention, and your daddy left, and everybody was mean to you growing up. Listen, I was bullied growing up. And I'm the youngest of all of my siblings. So I've always felt like I was under this thumb of be this person and be that person. Y'all, I'm a spiritual leader and teacher. I've been a creative all my life. There are things that I'm called to do that other people are not. And if I can't feel comfortable being who she is, then it's going to cause depression for me. It's going to cause me to feel like I got to rebel and I can't not stay in the places that I was. Listen, it is a cycle of things that keep happening over and over and over again because we have failed to learn how to love walk. We fail to look at a person that's different than us and to understand how they feel when they're being scrutinized every time they walk through a door because they don't dress the way you do. They don't see life the way that you do. And here's where we can manage this. Love considers, it covers, it accepts, it gives grace, it gives mercy, it corrects when needed, but not in a manipulative, controlling way. And it heals the land. Love is what heals the land. So until I take on that persona, you take on that persona, we all begin to live that out, we're going to continue to see the same things that we've seen for our entire life. All the things the end times talk about, we're going to see it all. But why? Yeah. Consider your ways. Lord, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. Yeah, let that be your prayer. Let that be your thought process. So, are we looking at end time situations? And yeah, but it's happened so often throughout the centuries. And then there's always something, a big something that happens. I don't know if y'all paying attention, but there's always a big something that happens after so long of us doing this. And it brings everybody to their knees and everybody's praying together, and nobody cares about race. Nobody cares about religion. Nobody cares about the differences. Nobody cares about the different agendas. Everybody's praying the same prayers to the same one God. And then all of a sudden things begin to regulate, and then we go on, because God is gracious and merciful and gives us opportunity after opportunity to change the way of our own heart, so that the dynamics of this life can shift. I want you to think on these things. This could have very well been another podcast episode of Spirit Solistically Speaking, right? Where we get our spiritual liberation through our soul's healing. Because this really is the message of the podcast. We got to heal our souls, heal our hearts, our minds, and our wills. But we can't be mad at those who don't know how if we're not willing to be their answer. Somebody has got to step away and say, I'm willing to be the one who loves instead of judges. I'm willing to be the one that welcomes you in and embraces you instead of pointing out all your faults and flaws. Jesus said, listen, deal with the log in your own eye before you start trying to deal with the speck in somebody else's. He says, judge not lest ye be judged. Condemn not lest ye be condemned. Forgive so you can be forgiven. And whatever judgment you meet or you give out, that's what you're going to be met with. When we begin to really understand the message of the gospel and what Christ Jesus was trying to get us to understand, then things will begin to change in the earth, and that salvation that we keep seeking and talking about and putting in our own perspective can take place. But until then, just consider your way. Consider the issues that are flowing out of your heart. If you're mad with anybody today, forgive them. I mean, literally release it all. Anything that happened before this moment, release them. Guess why? Because they're just not you. They're not going to do everything the way that you do. And if people can learn how to live as unto God on their own, and they learn how to function, listen, go into the organizations that where you feel like you fit and y'all get along, and y'all can go in there and fellowship together on one accord. Not to somebody else's demise. You getting together to pray against something? How about you get together and pray for the reconciliation of in their hearts and their minds, and with their families and with their friends, instead of returning back to sender? How about you pray that whatever is broken in them that will cause them to want to hurt you or murder you or talk about you, that it will be healed, and then offer the love and the embrace that's going to help them to grow into something else. Because until we change it, annihilation is coming. It's coming. It's coming. But if my people who are called by my name, God is love. Yeah. I want y'all to chew on that. Okay? Think on these things. And you know what? I think I'm actually going to go ahead and make this a bonus episode. Yeah. I'll go ahead and put it in there. I love you so much just because I can. If you desire to share this, please do so. Please do so. Encourage others to get these thoughts in their mind so that we can move towards shifting the dynamics of this world that we're living in. Really consider it. The end times, annihilation, all these different things. What if it's just in our hands? What if us being the expression of God in the earth is literally God seeing what we do to come back into wholeness and oneness? That's all our journey. What's my purpose in life? To find your strong suit so you can offer it to the world, so that the weak can have what they need, and then they can get stronger, and then they can go and give their strength to somebody else, and we can make this thing do what it do. Then will I hear from heaven. And then when I hear the land. And so Jesus speaking about the kingdom of God being within us. Take inventory of your kingdom. What's going on in your kingdom? Because when you realize what's going on in yours and you begin to clean up your streets, right? Clean up your government, your self-government. Then the entire kingdom of God can come to earth. Love can exist. And you can be different and do what you do in your own little corner of the world. Find your tribe. Y'all be good together. But respect the fact that other people have theirs too. Alright. So I'm out for real. I'm out for real. I'm out for real. I'm out for real. And I'll talk to y'all again soon. Many blessings.